So let's listen to see how absurd the 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 atheist has become in their desperate attempt to obfuscate and to equivocate away from the truth of the existence of God. Look at what they'll employ, the philosophical sophistry and nonsense that we see here, okay? And then you tell me, does anyone get this stuff, okay? So basically what they're saying is that you have to delve into a whole abyss, an abyss of philosophical mumbo-jumbo in order to be able to understand their defense for not believing in God or God not existing. And so listen to this and just see the clownery of this mentality.
Yeah.
Naturalistic
What I'm
evolution.
saying is if that internal critique went through, right, it would follow that what the necessary conditions for justified beliefs would be something that God couldn't have, right?
Well, no, it wouldn't. This is the viewpoint that God doesn't exist. That naturalistic evolution is true.
Yeah, what I said did you not hear what I said? I said was what would be required for justification on this view is something that God could not have, right?
Well, you wouldn't need to talk about God because this is the idea God doesn't exist. That's all.
Yeah, I'm asking, right? If somebody wants to have a view in which beliefs are justified, right? How is it that you could construct such a view such that God's beliefs are justified in a way that would make it not possible for there to be justification on atheism?
I'm not sure.
Could you imagine the nonsense that just was spit out? Could you imagine trying to make sense of that statement on behalf of the not God worldview? I mean, it goes beyond, it's beyond words. What exactly did that man just say? He's talking about something that sounded like God's belief, okay? What on earth, if we're speaking from the God worldview, from the Christian understanding and conception of God, where does anyone, not even the one standing in that worldview, know anything about the manipulation of God's thinking, why he does things, where he, we figure out the why God does things by letting Scripture interpret Scripture, and we see throughout the course of history what happened and what laid out. And sometimes God does it discloses motives, but this guy's asking, like, how can God believe? He's talking about going into the mind of God and judging his true beliefs, and he's trying to find that somehow to try to make a case for the not God worldview. Honestly, I don't have time to collect PhDs in philosophy. If he's going to try to sell this to any modern audience of people, just, how does he, it's like the people that are in the God worldview can clearly state and open up a book of answers. It makes absolutely no sense. Hang on, let me see. Am I paused? Nope. Okay, so it's going to be an incredibly hard sell to anyone who's listening, any audience, and to think that they're going to follow along with this denial of God. When somebody asks you, so do you believe in God? No, because I have to assess God's belief system, and if he can believe certain things, and we have to justify true belief. And and it's funny how there's so many of these websites popping up, these YouTube pages of these atheists, and they are packed, hundreds of them gather in, and they debate Christians, and Christians mop the floor with them, and they have a camaraderie of, instead of the camaraderie of winners, it's a camaraderie of losers. They all high five each other and support each other in their the ridiculousness of the gibberish and the equivocations that they do in their argumentation. Like they don't win arguments, but they commend each other, and they all commend each other, and celebrate each other's in their failed attempts of making sense. And it's amazing, and there's hundreds of them, and there's one popping up every single day, and they just don't make cohesive and arguments. They just don't make it's basically one big denial party. That's basically all it is. So let's try and see if we can decipher what on earth this man is talking about.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Never
there's
will.
no
So
way
how
to
is it that God?
There would be literally no way to justify anything. That's the point.
Yeah, how is it that God's beliefs are justified?
Oh, so you're asking me if God's beliefs are justified.
Yeah, how are God's
You're not
beliefs
asking
justified?
how the naturalistic.
You see, and another thing they love to do is they love to come up with some kind of weird examples or possibilities, or what if God were this, what if God were that scenarios, and you're not going to make sense, because we're standing on the worldview, and we ourselves cannot incorporate what ifs and hypotheticals of what could be and what should. All we're operating on is what has been revealed. We're not asked to create hypotheticals and possibilities and all that. We don't know any of that. So why should we assume that any of that is real? In order to make real judgments on hypotheticals, that makes absolutely no sense.
Evolutionists would justify beliefs.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so we've left my critique of naturalistic evolution. Now you're wanting to ask me why I think beliefs in God are justified.
Not beliefs in God, why God's beliefs are justified.
What?
You see that? Why my belief? I mean, you can only, as a Christian, you can only judge your beliefs in God. You're only defending. We think God's thoughts after Him, but He doesn't. He doesn't expose. Any of this. None of this is exposed within the Christian worldview. That's why these silly syllogisms cannot work, or they're absolutely ridiculous, and they will not come out. You won't see any of these things in formal debates, because they're just laughable, incredibly laughable. Because, and if the Christian is allowed to go into these silly, nonsensical rabbit holes, they should be ashamed of themselves, because in order to demonstrate why you believe or you don't believe, or or make a statement of belief and a non-belief, you don't need any of this. It's so ridiculous. And these are grown men who come up with these silly syllogisms, philosophical syllogisms, that are constructed in stupidity and absolutely never represent correctly the Christian worldview. So if anybody gives you something that does not represent the Christian worldview as it's revealed in Scripture, don't go into the Don't go into the rabbit hole because it's just a silly denial formulation of the atheist and their absurdity and their runaway from actual truth.
So, God's beliefs?
Yeah.
Well, God
What
would be
justifies God's belief?
omnipotent.
What difference does that make?
It would be a brute fact that any omnipotent being would have justified beliefs.
Wait a minute. That doesn't follow.
Well, yeah, it would because he's omniscient.
It doesn't follow in whose world it doesn't follow. It doesn't follow in an atheist worldview. Obviously not, because you're set to try to deny these things. But it does follow in the if you're trying to steel man or do some kind of internal critique of Christianity, it's by way of the worldview of Christianity that you have to, find some kind of contradiction. But he has to invent these silly hypotheticals, and they're hypotheticals nonetheless because they don't represent the true revelation of which the worldview consists of.
Premise
Wait.
one,
But-
any omniscient being would have justification for whatever they believe. Now, if you say an omniscient being believes things, that might be something people disagree on, whether they have beliefs or not. But if that's the case, premise one, it would be a brute fact that any omniscient being would have justified beliefs. Premise two, God is an omniscient being. Conclusion, God has justified beliefs.
Yeah, saying God is omniscient is just repeating the claim. I'm asking what justifies his belief.
Oh, I couldn't answer
Shame
that
that he
as a
ruined that really
non-omniscient
good
being.
first premise, though.
Yeah, but if God's beliefs are not justified, right, then like if there isn't any way for God's beliefs to be justified, then I don't see why theism has some advantage.
See, that's not what he just described. Is not the worldview. I would say, well, no, you're not. You cannot use that because that is not exposed within. That is not exposed within the Christian worldview, and it's the Christian worldview that you are supposed to be critiquing. Okay, and no Christian gets into the idea of how to justify God's belief. That makes absolutely no sense. And to spend more than 30 seconds in that without rejecting it is ridiculous. It makes no sense. This is the worldview that we have accepted God's judgments and God's mandates. We don't go there's nothing behind there other than the response of the Christian. Okay, that's what the Christian is working on. Okay, so if the reason why the non-believer or the not God worldview person has to come to faith is because what has been revealed is the mandate. And that's it. And that's what the Christian has always done. The Christian isn't trying to pry on something that doesn't exist. The revelation does not consist of prying into God's mind, as part of believing. No, God makes us believe. The revelation is confirms what He's already has done, and so that's as far as we go. We can't go deeper into some kind of pretend mind reading of God.
Over naturalism,
Well, there would be
atheism.
There would be no way any of us could justify God's beliefs.
I didn't ask that.
Well, you're asking me how God can justify His beliefs, but you're
Yeah.
asking a fallible, impotent, finite mind to answer that question. But
Yeah.
I can't answer that.
So I appreciate what the Christian here is doing, but he doesn't need to do it. He doesn't need to do it because the ground that he's standing on does not require him to have to try to assess or reach into anything other than the mandate or rather than the revelation of God. Okay, that little trick is being done by the sophistry of the atheist, who is trying to reach and find desperate measures to try to trip the validity of the revelation and the God worldview. So I'm going to end it here. I could go on. This whole thing is about 24 minutes at length, and I could critique it for 2 hours afterwards. But this is just a snippet of what might, if I had time, I would present a lot more of, just to show the lengths and to the extent of what's out there. And these are just trickeries of atheists that come. They have a number of failed approaches in their bags of denial. And so we have to continually demonstrate to these atheists how these things just don't work. It doesn't work in logic. It doesn't work in real life. It doesn't work in normal conversations that we have with them. People basically want to know, do you believe or you don't believe? Why do you believe? Why don't you believe? But to reach out into all of these philosophical mumbo jumbo is not very honest. It's not honest. It's more absurdity. And the more they try, the more absurd they prove to be in their running away from the truth. Okay? So until next time, God bless. Take care.
Anchor.fm/DRU News 365.